I was sitting in the hospital waiting room when my daughter stumbled through the automatic doors, barely able to walk. Her face was pale as death, her hands trembling. When she saw me, she collapsed into my arms and whispered words that made my blood run cold. "Mom, she said you deserved this, that our family deserved to suffer." Then she fainted. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm 62 years old, a retired registered nurse who spent 35 years working in pediatric care. I raised 2 children alone after my husband died in a construction accident when our kids were young. My daughter Sarah is 29, and my son David is 34. We're a close family, or at least we were until Sarah married into the Preston family 2 years ago. The Prestons are old money, the kind of family that has a wing named after them at the local museum. Sarah met their son, Blake Preston, at a charity gala where she was working as an event coordinator. He swept her off her feet with expensive dinners, weekend trips to wine country, tickets to Broadway shows. I was happy for her. She deserved someone who treated her well after a string of disappointing relationships. But I never liked his mother, Mythoria Preston. From our first meeting, she looked at me like I was something unpleasant she found on the bottom of her shoe. At the engagement party, she made a point of mentioning that Sarah was the first person in the Preston family to marry someone without a college degree from an Ivy League school. Sarah has a bachelor's degree from our state university, which she earned while working 2 jobs. I was so proud of her. But to Mythoria, it wasn't good enough. The wedding was elaborate, paid for entirely by the Prestons. Mythoria made all the decisions, from the flowers to the menu to the guest list. Sarah tried to include some of our family traditions, small touches that represented her father's memory and our heritage, but Mythoria vetoed everything. "We have standards to maintain," she would say with that cold smile of hers. After the wedding, things got worse. Sarah and Blake moved into a house the Preston family owned, a beautiful colonial in the nicest part of town. But it came with strings attached. Mythoria had a key and used it freely, showing up unannounced to inspect how Sarah kept house, to criticize her cooking, to comment on her clothes and hair and weight. My daughter started losing herself. She stopped calling me as often. When we did talk, her voice sounded hollow, like she was reading from a script. She lost weight, too much weight. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. When I asked if everything was okay, she would smile that fake smile and say everything was perfect. 6 months ago, Sarah came to my house unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon. She looked terrible, thinner than ever, with her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She sat at my kitchen table and cried for 20 minutes straight before she could even speak. "Mom, I'm so tired," she finally said. "I can't do anything right. Mythoria critiques everything. The way I fold Blake's shirts, the way I arrange the furniture. She told Blake I'm not sophisticated enough for business dinners, so now he goes alone. And Blake, he just agrees with whatever she says." "Then leave," I said simply. "Come home. You can stay here as long as you need." She shook her head. "I can't. I signed a prenup. If I leave, I get nothing. And I'm trying to get pregnant, Mom. I thought if we had a baby, things would get better. Blake would stand up for me. We'd be our own family." My heart sank. A baby wouldn't fix this. A baby would only trap her further. But I could see the desperate hope in her eyes, so I didn't say what I was thinking. Instead, I held her and told her I was here whenever she needed me. 3 months ago, Sarah called me in the middle of the night. She was pregnant, 12 weeks along. She sounded genuinely happy for the first time in months. "Blake is excited," she said. "And Mythoria, she actually smiled at me today, Mom. A real smile. She said I was finally doing something useful for the family." I swallowed my anger at that comment and tried to be happy for my daughter. If this pregnancy brought her some peace, some measure of acceptance in that cold house, then I would support her. But the peace didn't last. Sarah started having complications around week 16. She was put on modified bed rest, told to avoid stress and strenuous activity. I offered to come stay with her, to help around the house, but Victoria insisted she had it covered. She hired a nurse, she said, someone more qualified than me. That stung, but I let it go. I visited when I could, bringing Sarah her favorite foods, books to read, anything to make the bed rest easier. But I noticed Victoria was always there during my visits, watching us like a hawk, making pointed comments about not tiring Sarah out. The nurse Victoria hired was named Patricia. She was pleasant enough on the surface, but something about her made me uneasy. The way she watched Sarah constantly, the way she reported every little thing to Victoria, the way she measured out Sarah's prenatal vitamins with such precision, always making sure Sarah took them in front of her. "Mom, I feel weird all the time," Sarah told me one afternoon when Patricia had stepped out of the room. "Like I'm in a fog. Everything is so exhausting. Is that normal?" I frowned. Some fatigue was normal with pregnancy and bed rest, but Sarah seemed more than tired. She seemed sedated. "Are you taking anything besides your prenatal vitamins?" I asked. "Just some herbal supplements Patricia gives me." Victoria said they're supposed to help with pregnancy wellness, all natural, from some exclusive wellness clinic. Alarm bells went off in my head. "What kind of supplements? Has your OB approved them?" Sarah looked confused. I don't know. I haven't seen my OB in a few weeks. Victoria said the practice was too far away, that it was stressing me out to travel. She found a new doctor who makes house calls. "Sarah, that's not right. You need to see a real obstetrician at a proper medical facility where they can monitor you and the baby properly." Blake says everything is fine. And Victoria says, "I don't care what Victoria says," I interrupted, more sharply than I intended. "This is your health and your baby's health. You need proper medical care." Sarah's face crumpled. "Please don't fight with them, Mom. I can't handle more conflict right now. I just want to get through this pregnancy and have a healthy baby." I backed off, but I couldn't shake my unease. That evening, I called my son David. He's a corporate lawyer, sharp and analytical. If something was wrong, he would know how to handle it. "Something isn't right," I told him. "I think Victoria is controlling Sarah's medical care, and I think those supplements might be more than just vitamins." David was quiet for a moment. "That's a serious accusation, Mom. Do you have any proof?" "Just my gut feeling. And 35 years of nursing experience. Let me do some digging," he said. "I have a friend who's a medical malpractice attorney. I'll see what he says about this situation." 2 weeks later, David called me back. "Mom, we need to talk. In person. Don't say anything to Sarah yet." We met at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. David looked grim. "I had my friend look into that wellness clinic Victoria mentioned. It's not a real clinic. It's a front for a concierge medical service that caters to wealthy people who want, let's call them unconventional treatments. The doctor making house calls isn't board certified in obstetrics. He's a general practitioner who lost his hospital privileges 3 years ago for ethical violations." My hands went cold. "What kind of violations?" "Prescribing unnecessary medications to wealthy clients who were paying out of pocket. Falsifying medical records. Nothing that got his license revoked, but enough to get him kicked out of every reputable hospital in the state. We need to get Sarah away from them," I said. "Today." David shook his head. "It's not that simple. Sarah is an adult. She's married. Legally, we can't force her to do anything. If we push too hard, Blake and Victoria might cut off all contact, and then we'd have no way to protect her. So what do? We document everything. We build a case. And when the time is right, we give Sarah the information she needs to make her own decision." He paused. "There's something else. I did some financial digging into the Preston family. They're not as wealthy as they appear. Blake's father made some bad investments before he died. The family is deeply in debt, maintaining appearances with credit and loans against properties. What does that have to do with Sarah?" The prenup Sarah signed, I managed to get a copy through some connections. If Sarah has a baby, and if she's deemed an unfit mother, or if she willingly gives up custody, Blake gets sole custody and full control of a trust fund that was set up for the child. A trust fund worth $10 million, established by Blake's grandfather. It's the only liquid asset the Preston family has left. The pieces started falling into place. The isolation, the strange supplements, the unqualified doctor. They're trying to make sure Sarah is too sick or too incapacitated to care for the baby. David nodded grimly. That's my theory. Get her dependent on medications. Make her seem unstable or unable to care for a child, then take the baby and access to the trust fund. But we need proof before we can act. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a spy in my own daughter's life. I visited regularly, always bringing my phone to secretly photograph the supplements Patricia gave Sarah, the bottles of prenatal vitamins, anything that might serve as evidence. I befriended Patricia's assistant, a young woman named Kelly who seemed uncomfortable with what was happening. I don't like giving Mrs. Preston all those pills, Kelly confided in me one day when Patricia was in another room. She sleeps all the time now. That can't be good for the baby. What exactly is she taking? I asked carefully. Kelly glanced around nervously. I shouldn't say, but there's a lot. More than just prenatal vitamins. Ms. Victoria brings new bottles every few days, and Patricia is always very specific about when Mrs. Preston takes each one. Kelly, if you're worried about Sarah's health, about the baby's health, you can help me help her. I'm a nurse. I know when something isn't right medically. She hesitated, then nodded. I'll see what I can do. 2 days later, Kelly texted me a photo of the medication log Patricia kept. My nursing training kicked in as I studied the list. Benzodiazepines for anxiety, but in doses higher than recommended for pregnancy. Sleep medications that were contraindicated during pregnancy. Herbal supplements that were actually known to cause birth defects. And something else, a medication I had to research that was sometimes used to induce early labor. I called David immediately. They're trying to make her deliver early, and they're drugging her to keep her compliant. That's attempted harm to a fetus, David said. We can go to the police now. No. If we do that and it falls apart in court, they'll make sure we never see Sarah or the baby again. We need to get her out first, then we go to the authorities. How do we get her out if she won't leave? We make them send her to us. I spent the next 2 days planning. I called Sarah and told her I was having a medical emergency, that I needed her. Please, honey, I'm scared. I need you. She promised to come, but when she didn't show up the next day, I knew Victoria had stopped her. So I played my next card. I called Blake directly. Blake, I need to speak with Sarah. Her father's birthday is coming up, and I have something of his I want to give her. It's important for the baby to have something from his grandfather. Blake, who had always been weak and easily manipulated, agreed to bring Sarah to my house that Sunday for a short visit. When Sarah arrived, I was shocked at how much worse she looked. She could barely walk on her own, leaning heavily on Blake. Her eyes were unfocused, her speech slightly slurred. She was 7 months pregnant, but looked like she was barely holding on. Mom, she said, trying to smile. Sorry I couldn't come sooner. I've just been so tired. I hugged her carefully, feeling how thin she'd become despite the pregnancy. It's okay, honey. Come sit down. I made your favorite tea. Blake hovered nervously. We can't stay long. Mother is expecting us for dinner. Of course, I said pleasantly. Just a quick visit. I had prepared everything carefully. The tea I gave Sarah was just chamomile, nothing more. But the tea I gave Blake had a healthy dose of a fast-acting laxative I'd obtained from a nurse friend. Within 20 minutes, Blake was rushing to my bathroom, where he would remain for quite some time. The moment he left the room, I turned to Sarah. Honey, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You're in danger. The baby is in danger. She looked at me with those foggy eyes. What? No, everything is fine. Victoria says Victoria is poisoning you. I took out my phone and showed her the photos of the medications, the research I'd done, the chemical analyses David's friend had run. These supplements she's giving you, they're not safe. Some of them are designed to make you sick, to make you incapable of caring for the baby. Sarah stared at the phone screen, blinking slowly as if trying to make sense of what she was seeing. No, that can't be right. Why would she? The trust fund, I said gently. Blake's grandfather set up a $10 million trust for your baby, but Blake only gets control of it if he has sole custody. They need you out of the picture. Tears started rolling down Sarah's face. I don't understand. I did everything they asked. I tried so hard to be good enough. Oh, honey. This was never about you being good enough. This was always about money and control. I took her hands. We need to get you to a real hospital right now. We need to make sure the baby is okay. And we need to flush these medications out of your system. But Blake is going to be in that bathroom for at least another hour. David is outside right now. We're going to take you to County General, where I used to work. People I trust. And we're going to keep you safe. Sarah looked torn, confused, still so conditioned to defer to Blake and Victoria. But then the baby kicked hard enough that I could see it from outside, and something shifted in her eyes. The maternal instinct that Victoria had been trying to suppress suddenly broke through the drug-induced fog. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's go. We moved quickly. David had pulled his car up to my back door. We got Sarah settled in the back seat just as Blake emerged from the bathroom, looking pale and weak. Where are you taking her? He demanded, but without much force behind it. To the hospital, I said firmly. She needs proper medical care from actual doctors. You can follow us if you want. We drove straight to County General. I called ahead to Dr. Lisa Martinez, an obstetrician I'd worked with for years. Lisa, I'm bringing in my daughter, 7 months pregnant, been given multiple contraindicated medications, possibly early labor induction drugs. I need a full tox screen and fetal monitoring. Bring her straight to L&D, Lisa said immediately. I'll be waiting. At the hospital, everything moved fast. They got Sarah into a bed, hooked up monitors, started running blood tests. Dr. Martinez's face grew increasingly grim as she reviewed Sarah's symptoms and the medication list I'd photographed. Margaret, this is serious, she said quietly, pulling me aside. Some of these drugs, if she's been taking them for weeks, could have caused significant harm. We need to keep her here for observation, and I'm legally required to report this. I know. My son is already preparing a police report. Blake arrived 30 minutes later with Victoria in tow. She swept into the hospital room like she owned the place, her face a mask of cold fury. What is the meaning of this? She demanded. Sarah, we're leaving right now. This is completely unnecessary and dramatic. But Sarah, propped up in the hospital bed with monitors beeping around her, looked at her mother-in-law with new clarity in her eyes. The fog was already starting to lift as the hospital fluids flushed her system. No, she said quietly. I'm staying here. Don't be ridiculous. Our doctor is perfectly capable of… Your doctor isn't board certified, I interrupted. And you've been giving my daughter medications that are dangerous for pregnant women. That ends now. Victoria turned her arctic glare on me. You have no right to interfere in my son's marriage. Sarah is Blake's wife, and what happens in their home is none of your concern. Actually, David said, stepping into the room with a folder of documents, when someone commits assault and attempted harm to a fetus, it becomes everyone's concern, especially law enforcement's concern. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. That's absurd. I've been helping Sarah through a difficult pregnancy. By giving her benzodiazepines in doses that exceed safe levels for pregnancy? By administering medication known to cause birth defects? By isolating her from proper medical care? David laid the documents on the bedside table. We have the medication logs. We have witness statements. We have chemical analyses of the supplements you provided. And we have a very compelling financial motive. Blake, who had been silent until now, spoke up weakly. Mother, what is he talking about? It's nothing, dear. These people are trying to cause trouble because they're not happy about Sarah marrying above her station. The trust fund, I said, looking at Blake. Your grandfather's trust fund for your children. You can only access it if you have sole custody. That's what this is about. Your mother has been systematically drugging Sarah to make her an unfit mother so you can take the baby and the money. Blake's face went white. He looked at his mother. That's not true. Tell them that's not true. Victoria's mask slipped entirely. Someone had to think about this family's future. Your father left us drowning in debt. This trust is our only way out. And that woman, she pointed at Sarah with undisguised contempt, was never going to be a proper Preston anyway. Better to remove her from the equation and raise the child correctly. The room fell into stunned silence. Blake sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Sarah started crying quietly. You need to leave, Dr. Martinez said firmly to Victoria. Now, security will escort you out if necessary. Victoria drew herself up with as much dignity as she could muster. This isn't over. My lawyers will... Your lawyers will be dealing with criminal charges, David interrupted. I've already filed a report with the police. They'll be here within the hour to take your statement. I suggest you get a good criminal defense attorney. Victoria turned on her heel and walked out, her heels clicking sharply on the hospital floor. Blake remained, looking lost and broken. I didn't know, he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. I swear, I didn't know what she was doing. Sarah looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. You knew I wasn't myself. You knew I was getting sicker and more confused. And you did nothing. You just let her take over my medical care, my life, everything. I thought she was helping. She said, You always believe what she says, Sarah interrupted, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. You never stood up for me. Not once. Blake opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. What could he say? She was right. I think you should go, Sarah said finally. I need to focus on keeping this baby safe. Everything else we can deal with later. After Blake left, Sarah broke down completely. I held her while she cried. This time not tears of exhaustion or confusion, but of anger and grief and relief all mixed together. I feel so stupid, she sobbed. How did I let this happen? You're not stupid. They isolated you, manipulated you, drugged you. None of this is your fault. Dr. Martinez came back with test results. Good news and challenging news, she said. The baby appears to be healthy. Strong heartbeat, good movement, normal size for gestational age. Sarah's vitamin levels are low, and she's definitely been overmedicated, but with proper care and time, she should recover fully. And the challenging news? I asked. Some of the medications she was given, they're associated with increased risk of premature labor. We're going to keep Sarah here on bed rest for the duration of the pregnancy. It's safer than sending her home where they might try to access her again. Sarah stayed in the hospital for 7 weeks. I was there every day, along with David. We brought her books and movies and her favorite foods. We talked about her father, about happy memories from her childhood, about plans for the future. Slowly, the real Sarah emerged again from under the fog Victoria had kept her in. The police investigation moved forward. Patricia, the nurse, agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. Kelly provided her medication logs and photographs. The evidence was overwhelming. Victoria was arrested and charged with assault, attempted harm to a fetus, conspiracy, and fraud. Blake wasn't charged. The prosecutors didn't believe he'd known about his mother's plan, but the damage to his reputation was severe. Sarah filed for divorce. The prenup turned out to be voidable because it had been signed under duress and with information withheld, specifically Victoria's plan to essentially steal the baby and the trust fund. David handled the case personally, and Sarah ended up with full custody, child support, and a significant settlement from the Preston family's remaining assets. 8 weeks after that terrible day when I'd practically kidnapped my own daughter from her toxic marriage, Sarah went into labor naturally. It was long and difficult. She was still recovering from months of being drugged, but she was strong and determined. I was in the delivery room, holding her hand, coaching her breathing just like I'd done for so many other mothers over my career. At 3:47 a.m., my granddaughter was born, perfect and healthy, with a powerful cry that filled the room. Sarah held her and sobbed with joy and relief. "Mom, look at her," Sarah whispered. "We did it. We saved her." "You saved her," I corrected gently. "You found the strength to leave, to fight back, to protect your baby." "I just helped." Sarah shook her head. "You did more than help. You never gave up on me, even when I'd given up on myself." She named the baby Grace Margaret, after my mother and me. Little Grace was a fighter from the start, healthy and strong despite everything her mother had been through during pregnancy. Victoria's trial happened when Grace was 6 months old. Sarah had to testify, recounting the isolation, the medications, the way she'd been systematically broken down. It was hard for her, bringing it all up again, but she did it with her head held high. The jury took only 3 hours to convict Victoria on all counts. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Blake never tried to see his daughter. Sarah heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to California, trying to rebuild his life away from the scandal. She was fine with that. Grace didn't need a father who'd stood by while she was nearly destroyed. Sarah moved into a small house near mine, bought with part of the settlement. She went back to school to finish a master's degree in nonprofit management. She wanted to start an organization to help other women escape controlling relationships, to identify the signs of systematic abuse before it went too far. "I can't change what happened to me," she said one afternoon as we watched Grace play with blocks on the living room floor. "But I can help make sure other women have the information and support they need to get out sooner than I did." David helped her set up the nonprofit. I volunteered my time, using my medical background to train their counselors on recognizing signs of drugging or medical abuse. It became a family mission, turning our nightmare into something that could help others. Grace grew into a happy, healthy toddler, then a curious preschooler. She had Sarah's smile and, I like to think, a bit of her grandmother's determination. She was surrounded by love, by a mother who'd fought for her before she was even born, by an uncle who'd helped save her, by a grandmother who would always protect her family. Sometimes Sarah still had nightmares about that time. She'd wake up panicked, thinking she was back in that house with Victoria, watching her every move. But then she'd go into Grace's room and watch her daughter sleep peacefully, safe and loved. And the fear would fade. "I think about what would have happened if you hadn't figured it out," Sarah told me once. "If you'd just accepted their explanation, believed them when they said everything was fine, they would have taken her from me, or worse." "But I did figure it out," I said firmly, "because that's what mothers do. We protect our children, no matter what. And you're doing the same thing now, protecting Grace, and helping other women protect their children too." 3 years after Grace was born, Sarah met someone new. James was a teacher, kind and gentle, with no interest in money or status. He loved Sarah for who she was, not for any family connections or potential inheritances. He was patient with her lingering trust issues, never pushing, always supportive. When he proposed, it was simple and perfect. Just the two of them on a beach at sunset, with him promising to honor and respect her, to be her partner, not her controller, to love Grace as his own. This time, Sarah planned her own wedding. Small and intimate, just close friends and family in my backyard. Grace was the flower girl, scattering petals with serious concentration. David walked Sarah down the aisle since her father couldn't be there. I watched my daughter marry for the second time, and this time I saw real joy on her face, real hope. Not the desperate determination to make a bad situation work, but genuine excitement for the future. After the ceremony, as everyone was eating cake and celebrating, Sarah pulled me aside. "Thank you, Mom," she said, "for everything. For refusing to believe I was fine when I clearly wasn't. For risking your relationship with me to save me. For being the kind of mother I want to be to Grace." "You already are that kind of mother," I told her. "Look at everything you've built, everything you've overcome. Your father would be so proud of you." She started crying, happy tears this time. "I wish he could have seen Grace." "He does see her," I said, believing it with my whole heart. "And he sees you, strong and whole and happy. That's all he ever wanted for you." The nonprofit Sarah founded grew steadily. They helped hundreds of women recognize and escape controlling relationships. They trained medical professionals to spot signs of systematic drugging or abuse. They worked with family courts to protect children in custody battles where one parent was dangerous. Sarah often spoke publicly about her experience, using her story to educate others. It was hard for her at first, being so vulnerable in front of strangers, but she knew it was important. If her story could save even one woman, one baby, from what she went through, it was worth it. I continued volunteering with the organization, using my nursing skills to help. It gave new purpose to my retirement years. Instead of just being a grandmother and former nurse, I was part of something important, something that made a real difference. Grace started kindergarten, bright and curious and confident. She knew her story, age appropriately. She knew her mom had been sick when she was born, that bad people had tried to hurt them, but that her family had fought back and won. She knew she was loved and safe. One day, Grace came home from school and announced she wanted to be a nurse like Grandma when she grew up. "So I can help people who are sick," she said seriously, "and make sure nobody gives them bad medicine." Sarah and I exchanged glances over her head, both of us trying not to cry. This beautiful, caring child had come so close to being taken from us, to being raised by people who valued money over humanity. But she was here, whole and healthy and full of compassion. Sometimes I thought about Victoria, locked away in prison. Did she ever regret what she'd done? Did she understand the enormity of trying to destroy her own grandchild's mother for money? Probably not. People like Victoria rarely saw themselves as the villains. Blake sent child support payments regularly, but never asked to see Grace. It was better that way. Grace had James now, a man who chose to be her father, who showed up to school plays and soccer games, who read her bedtime stories and taught her to ride a bike. Blood didn't make a family. Love did. 4 years after Victoria went to prison, she requested a meeting with Sarah. The prison counselor called to explain that Victoria wanted to apologize, that she'd been in therapy and wanted to make amends. Sarah struggled with the decision. Part of her wanted to refuse, to deny Victoria even this small acknowledgement, but another part, the part that had healed and grown stronger, wanted closure. "I'll go with you," I offered. "You don't have to do this alone." Sarah shook her head. "No, I need to do this by myself, to prove to myself that I'm not afraid of her anymore." The prison was cold and institutional, all gray walls and fluorescent lights. Sarah sat across from Victoria in a small room with a guard watching. Victoria looked older, diminished. Prison had stripped away her polish and revealed the brittle, desperate woman underneath. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Sarah replied. "Why did you want to see me?" Victoria took a shaky breath. "To apologize and to explain, though no explanation excuses what I did." She told a story of mounting debts and desperation, of a family legacy crumbling, of a husband who died leaving her drowning in problems she didn't know how to solve. The trust fund had seemed like the answer. If Blake had custody, if he controlled that money, the family could survive. But it wasn't just about the money, Victoria admitted. It was about control, about not being able to accept that things had changed, that my world was different than it used to be. You represented everything I'd lost. Youth, options, the ability to start over. I resented you for that. So you tried to destroy me, Sarah said flatly. Yes. And I nearly destroyed my grandchild in the process. A grandchild I've never met, will never meet. Victoria's voice cracked. That's my real punishment. Not this prison, but knowing I threw away any chance of a relationship with my own family. Sarah sat in silence for a moment, then stood up. I accept your apology. I even understand, in a way, how you got to that place. But understanding isn't forgiveness. What you did to me, to my baby, that's not something I can forgive. We both have to live with that. She walked out without looking back. Later, she told me it felt like shedding the last weight she'd been carrying. Victoria's apology, her explanation, none of it changed what had happened. But hearing it, rejecting it, walking away from it, that gave Sarah a power she hadn't had before. The years passed. Grace grew from a sweet child into a thoughtful teenager. She volunteered with her mother's organization, helping design educational materials for kids her age about healthy versus unhealthy family dynamics. She wanted to be a therapist, she'd decided, to help people heal from trauma. Sarah's nonprofit expanded to 3 states, helping thousands of women and children. She wrote a book about her experience, Poisoned Trust, which became a bestseller and brought even more attention to the issue of systematic abuse in marriages. She used her platform to advocate for stronger laws protecting vulnerable people from family members who meant them harm. David made partner at his firm and specialized in family law, particularly cases involving parental abuse or custody disputes. He said our family's experience had shown him where he needed to focus his career. He never married, but he was a devoted uncle to Grace, teaching her to think critically, to question authority when something felt wrong, to trust her instincts. As for me, I continued volunteering and spending time with my family. Watching Sarah rebuild her life, seeing Grace grow into such a remarkable young woman, supporting other families through similar crises. This became my purpose in my later years. On Grace's 16th birthday, we had a family dinner at Sarah's house. James grilled steaks. Grace made her famous chocolate cake. Sarah coordinated everything with the organizational skills that now ran a nonprofit empire. David brought gifts and terrible jokes. I sat back and watched them all, my family, whole and happy and safe. What are you thinking about, Mom? Sarah asked, catching my expression. About that day in the hospital waiting room, I said. When you collapsed in my arms and told me Victoria said we deserved to suffer. And look at us now. We didn't just survive, we thrived. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. Because you wouldn't let us do anything else. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. That's what mothers do, I said simply. We fight. Grace raised her glass of sparkling cider. To fighting, she said with a grin. And to Grandma, the toughest fighter I know. We all raised our glasses to fighting, to healing, to family, to the strength that comes from refusing to be broken, to the love that survives even the cruelest attacks. Victoria had tried to destroy us because she saw our family as weak, as beneath the Prestons, as disposable. But she'd underestimated the strength that comes from genuine love, from generations of resilience, from a mother's determination to protect her child at any cost. In the end, all Victoria's money and status and scheming had gotten her nothing but a prison cell and estrangement from her family. Meanwhile, we had everything that mattered. We had each other. We had our health and our happiness and our purpose. We had won not by being cruel like her, but by being strong and refusing to give up. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my porch and thought about the journey we'd all been on. The fear and pain and desperate days when I wasn't sure we'd survive. but also the moments of courage, of revelation, of slowly reclaiming what had been taken from us. I thought about Sarah finding the strength to leave, to testify, to rebuild. I thought about David using his skills to protect us and then to help others. I thought about Grace growing up knowing she was loved and worthy and strong. And I thought about myself, an old retired nurse who'd spent her career caring for other people's children and then had to fight to save her own daughter and grandchild. We'd all been changed by what happened. We couldn't go back to who we were before, but maybe that was okay. Maybe being forged in fire had made us stronger, more aware, more capable of helping others who face similar situations. Sarah's story, our family's story, it wasn't unique. Every day, somewhere, another woman was being isolated and controlled and systematically broken down by someone who was supposed to love her. Every day, another pregnancy was being weaponized. Another child was being used as leverage for money or power. But because of what we'd been through, because we'd survived and then turned our survival into action, some of those stories had different endings. Some of those women got out sooner. Some of those babies were protected before irreparable harm was done. That was our legacy. Not the trauma or the pain, but what we'd built from the ashes. A family stronger than ever. An organization that saved lives. A new generation embodied in grace that knew how to recognize abuse and had the courage to fight against it. I looked up at the stars, thinking about my husband who died so long ago, before any of this happened. "We made it," I whispered to him. "Our family, we made it through. And we're okay. Better than okay. We're strong." The night air was cool and peaceful. Tomorrow, I'd go back to volunteering, helping the next woman who needed support to leave a dangerous situation. Tomorrow, Sarah would continue running her organization, speaking and writing and fighting for others. Tomorrow, Grace would go to school and volunteer and become more herself. Tomorrow, David would take on another family law case, using what he'd learned to protect another family. But tonight, I just sat in the peace we'd fought so hard to achieve. The peace that Mythoria had tried to steal, but that we'd reclaimed through determination and love and refusing to be broken. In the end, that's what saved us. Not money or status or power, the things Mythoria valued above everything, but love. A mother's love for her daughter, a brother's love for his sister, a grandmother's love for her unborn grandchild. Love that gave us the strength to fight when fighting seemed impossible. Love that helped us heal when we thought we'd never be whole again. Love that transformed our trauma into purpose. We'd won not just the legal battle or the custody fight, but something more important. We'd won our lives back, our dignity, our futures. We'd won the right to be happy, to be safe, to be ourselves without fear. And that victory, earned through the hardest days of our lives, was something no one could ever take away from us. We were survivors. We were fighters. We were family. And we were free.